In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
I was going through some old file folders the other day, part of that never-ending process of deciding how long to keep things. Amidst all of the folders having to do with various programs that I ran as campus minister at UC Berkeley was one labeled Gilbert Estrada. I opened it, and memories came flooding back. Gilbert Estrada, however, wasn't a program. Rather, Gilbert was a large, perhaps intimidating, but very shy man. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and as far as I know, that wasn't very often. I'd see him during the day in various places on the south side of Berkeley's campus. He'd usually be standing alone, holding on to the large duffel bag that held what few belongings he had. Sometimes, as I passed him, I would speak to him. Most often, not. I also saw Gilbert quite regularly in the evenings when I'd leave Canterbury House after a meeting or a program. As you might have guessed, Gilbert was homeless, and for several years made his home behind Canterbury House's dumpster. While some of the residents of Canterbury House were initially a little uncomfortable with his presence, he was never a problem for us. He looked after the parking lot. He told us about abandoned cars or if people were prowling around. He also served as a living reminder to the Canterbury community that we had a neighbor who lived next door, but in a house with no walls. His situation became the starting point for several focused discussions, not only among the residents, but among my staff and Berkeley Canterbury's board. And over the years that Gilbert lived in our parking lot, he helped dozens of Cal students see beyond their books. The students would sometimes see the Berkeley police trying to move him along because of vagrancy laws. Berkeley didn't call them no camping laws. The residents ultimately came to his rescue and asked the police to leave him be, that they preferred him there to any other alternatives. Canterbury House folks would take him food sometimes behind that dumpster. And it was behind that dumpster that Gilbert died, coincidentally, 15 years ago yesterday. As I mentioned earlier, Gilbert was shy and very quiet. He was not at all like some of the other Berkeley homeless who, because of frustration and mental illness, drew attention to themselves by shouting obscenities while walking down the street or by getting into arguments and fights in our parking lot. Gilbert didn't cry out for attention or help, at least not verbally. His presence, however, was a visible cry for help. He was often dirty. His clothes fit poorly. He had some kind of tattoos on his arms that he was constantly scratching. We did know from various social service providers that assistance was offered to Gilbert, but he usually refused it. After hearing the story of blind Bartimaeus this morning, it's not hard to find resonances with Gilbert's story. There are differences, to be sure, significant ones, but the similarities and differences taken together send powerful messages. Bartimaeus was a blind beggar. He was marginalized. Gilbert was intimidating and homeless, marginalized. Bartimaeus' physical condition prevented him from participating in the proper or expected temple rituals. His social position, if the crowd's rebukes of him are any indication, kept him away from people of influence. The same could easily be said of Gilbert. I did learn that he was raised Catholic, but I wonder if he would have been welcomed at one of the local parishes at the main service on Sunday. Bartimaeus, however, didn't want to accept his conditions, physical or social, as final. He perceived help in the person of Jesus and cried out. Despite the crowd's interference, he persisted, and finally Jesus heard him and granted his request. Jesus tells Bartimaeus that his faith has made him well, or in another translation, his faith has saved him. Gilbert, on the other hand, apparently did not ask much for help. I never saw him beg or ask for anything. The closest I saw was him standing in line for a free lunch. And so we have a significant difference here in these stories, but that's not to fault Gilbert. Gilbert, according to all accounts, was mentally ill. His blindness, if you will, was internal and may have prevented him from seeing the nature of the help around him, or that illness and the treatment he had previously received put up barriers that he felt he could no longer cross. Help was available to both Bartimaeus and Gilbert, but in both cases there were crowds preventing easy access. In Bartimaeus' case, it was the actual rebuke to keep quiet. In Gilbert's case, it was our societal dis-ease with the homeless and mentally ill that kept him from getting the care he needed. Our tendency to criminalize the homeless, to deny them the dignity of every human being. And so I look at Gilbert's story and that of Bartimaeus, and I have to ask, where am I in these stories? For I believe very profoundly that God is speaking to us, to me here. Am I Bartimaeus, blind, in need of saving, kept from society, kept from getting the help I need by society, yet persistent in seeking it out? Am I Gilbert, too inwardly blind or too psychically hurt to seek out the help I need? Perhaps as an even more disturbing question, am I a member of the crowd, shushing Bartimaeus, trying to keep him from bothering the important people? Or am I a contributing member of today's society, refusing to see the homeless at the least, or to move them along when they become too noticeable? Or could I be Jesus, silencing those who would deny access and asking, what do you want? Maybe I'm all of them at different times. And maybe it is that odd position of inhabiting all of those roles that makes a portion of the passage we heard from Jeremiah so powerful. I'm going to bring them back, Jeremiah writes. From the north, I will gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them will be the blind and the disabled, expectant mothers and those in labor, a great throng will return here. With tears of joy, they will come back. While they pray, I will bring them back. I will lead them by quiet streams and on smooth paths so they don't stumble. We are all blind, often recognizably, often not so much. We are all disabled some way or another. But those conditions do not prevent us from acting or responding in ways that are in accordance with God's great good desires for our world. How is God's invitation to those needing restoration made, unless through us? How do we make our needs known? How are we to know of God's healing except through others? Jeremiah holds out hope for us. We all need healing. We all need saving. The Greek word is the same for both. We need them over and over again. And we need to be provoked to hear the cries of the needy around us and to be converted from silencing those cries to responding to them. Our eyes must be opened over and over to see Christ in Gilbert, in the abused, in the refugees, in those whose lives are torn apart by war or natural disasters. And our eyes need to be opened again and again to address those spiritual illnesses within ourselves that prevent us from responding to those kinds of needs. In the various roles we might assume in these stories, I can't help but sense that Gilbert was Jesus for those who lived at and met at Canterbury House, including me. His presence elicited a response. Some simply ignored him. Others tried to prevent interactions between the important people and the marginalized from happening. Some sought to learn from him and to help him. Fortunately, I would say Jesus was able to act through Gilbert and teach and heal some of the residents, as well as the chaplain. In rapid response to Gilbert's death, some of the residents invited a well-known homeless advocate, J.C. Orton, to speak to the community. We planned a memorial service, both to dignify Gilbert's and the other homeless deaths, and to give residents a chance to mourn their neighbor. We invited others to join with us and the homeless community in seeking some kind of healing. My participation in that service was humbling. And I know that many in this congregation here who address the needs of the hungry and homeless find their service equally humbling and gratifying. And I invite you to speak with Deacon Nadine or a member of the outreach committee or advocacy team to learn what more you might do. Many scolded Bartimaeus, telling him to be quiet. But he shouted even louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him forward." They called him. "Be encouraged, get up, he's calling you." Throwing his coat to the side, he jumped up and came to Jesus. Jesus asked Bartimaeus, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said, "Teacher, I want to see again." Jesus said, "Go, your faith has healed you." At once he was able to see, and he began to follow Jesus on the way. May we jump up when Jesus calls us, regain our sight, and follow him on the way. Amen.